Hi, I'm John Fluevog, and I'm in my kitchen, and I'm sitting beside my most excellent little shoe part thing that I made, and my little flowers in my garden, and I thought I'd read you a book. Why not, right? It's another Roald Dahl book, which I'm a fan of. It's called The Twits. Two people on their head, so you can see that. And so we're going to introduce Mr. Twit, Mrs. Twit, the roly-poly bird, and the Muggle-Wumble monkeys. So Roald Dahl the Twits. So here we go. The first chapter is entitled Hairy Faces. That's a little ominous, isn't it? What a lot of hairy-faced men there are around nowadays. How true. When a man grows hair all over his face, it's impossible to tell what he really looks like. Yeah, it's true. Well, perhaps that's why he does it. He'd rather you didn't know. Then there's a problem of washing. When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it makes me laugh. I'm busting up, sorry. When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it must be a big job, as when you do and wash all the hairs on your head. So what I want to know is this. How often do all those hairy-faced men wash their faces? It is only once a week, like us, on Sunday nights? Or do they shampoo it? Do they use a hairdryer? Do they rub tonic in it to stop their faces from going bald? Do they go to a barber and have their hairy faces cut and trimmed? Or do they do it themselves in front of a bathroom mirror with nail scissors? I don't know. But the next time you see a man with a hairy face, which will probably be as soon as you step out on the street, maybe you'll look at them more closely and start wondering about some of those things. So the first guy we're going to talk about, Mr. Twit, and Mr. Twit has a very long facey hair indeed. Well, okay. Mr. Hip was what? Well, Mr. Hip. No, Mr. Twit. Yeah, Mr. Hip Twit. Okay, Mr. Hip Twit. We'll call him Mr. Hip Twit, all right? Mr. Hip Twit was one of those very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except for his forehead, his eyes, and his nose, were covered with thick hair. The stuff even poured in his revolving tufts out of his nostrils and ear holes. Oh, how gross. Mr. Twit felt that his hairiness made him look terrifically wise and grand. But in truth, he was none of these things. Mr. Twit was a twit. He was born a twit. And now at the age of 60, he was a bigger twit than ever. Oh. The hair on Mr. Twit's face didn't grow smooth and matted as it does on most hairy men. It grew in spikes that stick out straight like bristles on a nail brush. And how often did Mr. Twit wash his bristly, naily, brushy face of his? The answer is never. Not even on Sundays. He hadn't washed it for years. Oh my gosh. Okay. Dirty beards. As you know, an ordinary unhairy face like yours or mine simply gets a bit smudgy if it's not washed often enough. And there's nothing so awful about that. But a hairy face is a very different matter. Things cling to hairs, especially food. Things like gravy go right in amongst the hairs and stay there. You and I, we can wipe our smooth faces with a flannel and we get, quickly looking more or less all right again. But the hairy man cannot do that. We also can, if we're careful, eat our meals without spreading food all over our faces, but not so the hairy man. Watch carefully the next time you see a hairy man eating his lunch, and you'll notice that even if he opens his mouth very wide, it's impossible for him to get a spoonful of beef stew or ice cream or chocolate sauce into it without leaving some of it on the hairs. Mr. Twit didn't even bother to open his mouth wide when he ate. As a result, and because he never washed, there was always hundreds of bits of both breakfast and lunch and supper sticking into the hairs around his face. They weren't even big bits, mind you, because he used to wipe them off with the back of his hand or his sleeve while he was eating. But if you look closely, not that you'd ever want to see the tiny specks of dried up scrambled eggs stuck to his hairs and spinach and tomato ketchup and fish fingers minced livers, and all those disgusting other things that Mr. Twit liked to eat. Oh my, this is quite disgusting. Oh, if you ever look closer, hold your noses, ladies and gentlemen. If you peeped deep into the mustachy bristles sticking out of his upper lip, you would probably see much larger objects that had escaped the wipe of his hand, things that had been there for months and months, like a piece of maggoty green cheese or moldy old cornflake, or even a slimy tail of a tin sardine. This is disgusting, I gotta say. Oh, because of all this, Mr. Twit never went really hungry. Well, that's handy, right? By sticking out his tongue and curling it sideways to explore the hairy jungle around his mouth, he was always able to find a tasty morsel here and there to nibble on. Well, what I'm trying to tell you is Mr. Twit was foul and smelly old man. He was an extremely horrid man, as you will find out in a moment. So we're going to stop there.